The White House briefing just wrapping up, where they were asked about the looming government shutdown, Senator Al Franken resigning, and Donald Trump Jr. asserting attorney-client privilege, and President Trump seeming to slur his words yesterday. Hello, everyone. I'm Dana Perino, and this is the Daily Briefing. Sarah Sanders was asked about Senator Al Franken's parting shot at President Trump. Listen.
I may be resigning my seat, but I am not giving up my voice. I will continue to stand up for the things I believe in.
Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel is live on Capitol Hill. They're certainly keeping you busy up there with these stories, Mike.
Well, Dana, good afternoon to you. After saying he would resign in the coming weeks, Senator Al Franken took a swipe at Alabama Republican Senate candidate Roy Moore and even President Trump.
I am leaving while a man who has bragged on tape about his history of sexual assault sits in the Oval Office, and a man who has repeatedly preyed on young girls campaigns for the Senate with the full support of his party.
Franken then left the United States Capitol saying he would be heading home to Minnesota. The reality is his support in the Senate crumbled yesterday, with dozens of his fellow Democrats calling on him to go. At least 8 women had come forward accusing Franken of sexual misconduct. I'm told there was intense pressure, both public and private, trying to convince him to get out. Fellow Minnesota Democrat Senator Amy Klobuchar saying today, quote, "Today, Senator Franken acknowledged that he could no longer serve in the Senate and resigned. As he and I discussed yesterday, this is the right decision." Other Democrats praised Franken for his announcement today.
I had a in-detail conversation with him yesterday and offered him my thoughts about what he needed to do. And he did what I suggested, and he did the right thing. And so I'm just going to leave it there.
I'm told a final resignation date has not yet been set, and that Senator Franken intends to fulfill his duties until that time. Dana.
All right. Let's bring in Ben Shapiro. He was able to listen. He's editor-in-chief of DailyWire.com, a syndicated columnist and host of The Ben Shapiro Show. So let me start with Al Franken. If the goal was to turn the tables on President Trump and the Republicans, did Al Franken's statement today do that?
I don't think Franken's statement did that, because Franken basically walked out and said, "I'm innocent, but I'm leaving anyway."
Right.
So that allows everybody else to say, "I'm innocent and I'm not leaving." If Franken really had any brains, what he would have done is he would have said, "You know, I've made some mistakes in my life, and now I'm going to do penance for them, and I wish that the president of the United States would do the same." But he didn't have the smarts to do that, or the lack of ego to do that. So instead, he didn't even take one for the team here. He's just leaving, and he's mad about it.
Does resigning in this way mean, like Conyers did, never really having to say they're sorry for actual accusations that are made against them? Because Franken has said he's not denying that these situations occurred, but he's saying that he's basically being run out of town, and he doesn't think it's fair if others are not going to be run out of town as well.
Let me be frank with you. I'm not sure he's even going to leave. I mean, he says that he's going to leave in a few weeks, but let's say that Roy Moore is elected and then he's seated without an ethics investigation, and then he turns around, Franken, and says, "Well, listen, Moore's here. You're going to throw me out, but you're going to keep Moore?" And I think that Franken's still trying to hold on. So I think the idea that he is going to be the example the Democrats use is the guy they pushed out. So Trump and Moore have to go. It's going to be kind of weak.
There is no political pain, really, though, for the Democrats in this, because if you're talking about just a Senate seat, Minnesota, the governor there, Governor Dayton, is likely to put up Tina Smith. She's the lieutenant governor, another Democrat. When the Republicans said they wouldn't seat Moore, that was actually more politically courageous, in my opinion, because that was saying, we're going to take our chances here. We'd like to have a Republican there, but we are not going to want to seat Moore. And most of them are standing by that position.
So 2 things can be true at once. It can be right to boot people from office who have engaged in incredibly alleged sexual abuse. And also, this can be a political hit. And the fact is that getting rid of Franken, as you say, does nothing for the Democrats to hurt them. I mean, they're going to replace Franken with another Democrat. Conyers leaving. He'll just be another member of his extended family, I'm sure, who ends up in that congressional seat because it's the fiefdom of Detroit.
That's the weirdest thing.
It's so bizarre, and none of them are qualified. I do like that his son and his grandnephew are going to get in a fight. I think it'll be like Richard III. His son's actually going to imprison his grandnephew in the Tower of London. But one of the things that is amazing is that the Republicans who have actually stood and said, listen, Moore can't be elected, or I'm not going to go vote for Moore, that's actually a political sacrifice that they're making. Democrats have yet to make an actual political sacrifice here.
Let me have you listen to Senator Bernie Sanders, who said this on CBS this morning.
We have a president of the United States who acknowledged on a tape, widely seen all over this country, that he assaulted women. So I would hope that maybe the President of the United States might pay attention to what's going on and also think about resigning.
So Sarah Sanders was asked about this in the briefing. She basically said, this is in the rearview mirror for us. The president addressed it in the campaign. I've addressed it from here. And they moved on. And she really didn't get pressed on it. But the Democrats, I think, with all this coordination, have decided if we all band together, then we can force President Trump out. I don't see that happening.
I don't think that President Trump is going to resign over allegations that he himself does not even believe to be true, even if they're credible. The fact is that this is not a matter of we're going to shame the president into resigning. This is a matter of here's a political club for us to beat the president with, and then hopefully in 2020 we can say that our house is clean, but the Republicans have not cleaned house. They have people like Moore, they have people like Trump, and we are going to stand up for women in a way that Republicans won't. Look, Bernie Sanders saying this stuff a week ago, he was saying that he thought that Al Franken might just stay. Right. So what changed? Right. Nothing changed. All that happened is the RNC endorsed Roy Moore, Trump endorsed Roy Moore, and suddenly the entire Democratic Party decided that Franken would be the sacrificial lamb so they can grab the moral high ground. It
seemed like Franken knew that, too, and that he was irritated about it. I want to get to another subject. Yesterday, apparently in a hearing, Donald Trump Jr. asserted attorney-client privilege because he had, in a conversation he had with his father. Jonathan Karl of ABC News asked Sarah Sanders about that. Let's take a listen.
Donald Trump Jr. refused to talk about his conversations with the president, citing attorney-client privilege. Would the president release him from any such privilege and allow him to speak to the committee?
That's a question you would have to ask his attorneys. We believe that his lawyers had a legitimate reason and basis for not answering those questions, but that's something I would direct you to his attorneys to address more fully.
Can you explain to me how it could be attorney-client privilege when neither Donald Trump Jr. nor President Trump are attorneys?
Again, that's something that you would have to talk with Don Jr.'s attorneys about. That's not something I'm going to be able to comment from here. Matthew?
I have to say, I think Sarah Sanders answered that absolutely correctly. But what about the issue, the underlying issue, the point that can you assert attorney-client privilege if neither of the parties are attorneys?
The answer is no. I mean, the short answer is no. This is something that all lawyers know, which is why you don't have superfluous parties on legal calls. If you're talking to the lawyer, then it's privileged. If it's you and me and 100 other people, and there happens to be a lawyer on the call for one of us, then it doesn't apply unless the lawyer is the lawyer for both. I mean, theoretically, if the lawyer is the lawyer for both Donald and Donald Trump Jr., then it's possible that it's privileged, but they'd have to make that case, and I think that's a pretty weak case.
All right. Ben Shapiro, thanks for being on the show today.
Thanks a lot.
Fox News alert: flames as far as the eye can see. Officials say the Southern California fires have burned through more than 100,000 acres in Los Angeles and Ventura counties. Parts of Highway 101, a major thoroughfare in the state, shut down as the inferno jumps the freeway. Senior correspondent Adam Housley is live in where are you? Carpinteria. Is that how I say that, Adam?
Carpinteria.
Help me. Okay, that's where you are. What's going on there? It looks very serious. You are actually having to wear a mask.
Yeah, the air quality here, Dana, is just brutal. It's obviously bad all over Southern California. A lot of school districts have closed because of it. But we're up here, you can see the ash come down. Actually, I have asthma, so I can feel it right away. So you put these on. This filter keeps that out. The firefighters now are fighting in this as well with apparatus, which makes it even more difficult. Behind me, this is the front edge of the fire. The Thomas Fire is now more than 100,000 acres. We're roughly 30 miles, Dana, from where this fire started. It's now threatening the town of Carpinteria, which is between Ventura and Santa Barbara. We've now into Santa Barbara County. About 13,000 people live here. The winds are coming and going, but you can see this fire is coming down right now. We're on the edge of town, basically out kind of like in a country area, maybe a half mile or so from where the city starts, maybe a little bit less than that. But this area has all been under evacuation orders, and the firefighters they set a backfire over on one side, but this is actually the front edge of the flames. And at this hour, as you can see, the firefight continues across California. Everybody hoping these winds kind of stay down. They're not as strong as they were expected, but they're still here, Dana.
Adam, what about the weather forecast? Is there any end in sight?
Yeah, they're saying those winds are going to stay through tomorrow. We do see gusts that come up, and then they'll stop. The concern is right now it's called backing down the hill. So the fire's coming down. The weather's allowing it to do that. It burns slowly down the hill, of course, much faster as it goes up because heat rises. But when that wind's coming this direction, so it's blowing towards me, when it comes, it can blow these embers into this house, for example, which is being protected right now, or across the ridge to another home. These can go a couple of miles in some cases when the wind picks up. So that's why everybody's very leery right here, because if this was to jump this area, it would go into Carpinteria. Now, we just drove through the 101 where you just mentioned a moment ago, which is right along the coast. One side, you got the On one side, you got the hills. The fire has burned all the way down to the water. They've stopped it there. This is the concern now, Dana.
All right, Adam, please take care of yourself, and we'll check back in with you in a little bit. Director Chris Wray defends the impartiality of the Robert Mueller investigation into ties to Russia. We will get Karl Rove's take on that and what would happen if President Trump fired Robert Mueller, the special counsel. FBI Director Chris Wray fielding tough questions from both sides of the aisle at an oversight hearing on Capitol Hill this morning. Republicans grilling him on the integrity of the special counsel's investigation into Russian interference in the presidential election. Director Wray defended his agency. Listen.
I am emphasizing in every audience I can inside the Bureau that our decisions need to be made based on nothing other than the facts and the law and our rules and our processes and our core values, and not based on any political considerations by any side of the aisle. The only loyalty oath I take is the one that I took when I was sworn into this job, which is a loyalty to the Constitution and the laws of the United States.
Let's bring in Karl Rove, former White House Deputy Chief of Staff and a Fox News contributor. Karl, Chris Wray was being asked repeatedly about these allegations, serious allegations of bias at the FBI. And there's then also been this wholesale questioning of the integrity of the institution. Where does that lead?
Well, no place good, and there's a reason why it's being questioned. A senior FBI agent, Peter Storzik, turns out to who was integral to the Hillary Clinton investigation and was at the earlier this year part of the Bob Mueller investigation of the Russian collusion charges. Turns out to have been exchanging anti-Trump emails with his mistress, an FBI attorney. And as soon as it was discovered, Mueller basically demoted him, took this longtime career field agent and put him in human resources. At the same time, the attorney left the FBI. So he acted appropriately, but this is not helpful to the cause of an impartial investigation to have this cloud hanging over it. You already had a bunch of attorneys involved in this who had given political contributions to either President Obama or President or Vice Secretary of State Clinton, and already raising a question of the impartiality of the investigation. This made it much worse.
Well, interesting you bring that up. There's a new CBS poll today that shows that pretty much along party lines, people think that the investigation into alleged collusion with Russia is that it basically goes down along party lines, that it's justified. 74% of Democrats say it is. 81% of Republicans think it is politically motivated, and actually independents are quite split on that. You wrote today in the Wall Street Journal, your weekly column, about why Trump would regret firing Mueller. You say, if he fires Mr. Mueller, he would ignite a political conflagration that would consume him, those around him, and his entire presidency. Don't do it, Mr. President. If you do, you'll regret it more than you regret anything else in your life. But do you think that the White House looks at a poll like this and thinks that they wouldn't pay a political price if Republicans already think it's politically motivated?
Yeah, well, look, maybe they do, but I would point out in the same poll, by a margin of 67-23, people said that Mike Flynn's taking a guilty plea was a serious matter for the administration. So they may see it as being biased. They may have some their misgivings about it. But at the end of the day, if the president fires a special counsel, what's going to happen is all the energy is going to go to the Democrats. They're going to be able to say, well, what's he got to hide? If the president did nothing wrong, and there's no evidence he did do anything wrong, there's been not a shred of evidence that there's been collusion with the Russians, then the best thing to do is let the investigation go forward. If he stops it, people say, well, what is he hiding? And in the course of the campaign, and this would not go away. The Democrats would pursue this every way they could in Congress, and it would become a big issue in the midterms, and the Democrats would be hammering away on what has he got to hide, and the Republicans would find it hard to answer that. And the Democrats are likely to win the congressional elections as a result, and then control the committees and bombard the president with hearings and demands for documents and so forth for the next 2 years. But if he didn't do anything wrong, and there is no evidence to indicate that he did do anything wrong, then express the confidence in the outcome of the investigation.
Can I ask you real quickly about your thoughts on Al Franken and that possibility? Could Republicans actually win a Senate seat next year in Minnesota, or is this not a politically painful thing for Democrats to do, to push Franken to resign?
Well, I'm sure it's a politically painful thing for them to do, and the Republicans have got a shot. Remember, this was one of the closest states between Clinton and Trump last fall, and in a midterm election, the Republicans, depending on who the Democrats put up and who the Republicans put up, might have a shot at it.
All right, Karl Rove, thank you so much.
You bet.
Fox News alert, President Trump signs a proclamation for National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day on the 76th anniversary of the Japanese attack on Hawaii. Let's listen.
And all along the Solomon Islands. Thank you, Jack, for being here. Appreciate it. You're a brave guy. Lawrence Perry carried ammunition to the gunners, and thinking about the lessons of Pearl Harbor, Larry said he hopes we can build up the military again. We are building up the military beyond what you ever thought. It got depleted. You know what happened over the last quite a long period of time, but not with us. Our budget's now going to be higher than ever before. We're building it up again, and we'll do it in your honor, okay? We're building it up, the best equipment in the world. We make it, and we're supplying it in very big numbers. Thanks. Thanks. And we're doing a job. Robert Fernandez. Robert?
Yes.
Nice seeing you, Robert. Served on the USS Curtis. Returned fire against the enemy, and he really gave it to them pretty good. They were very successful at the return fire. Good job. You look like you're about 50 years old. You must have been very young. You look great. 3. Well, you look great. George Blake stood watch on the Hawaiian shores, ready to repulse a feared invasion. George, thank you, George. Good. Pretty well seen. You'll never forget that, right?
I've never forgotten.
No, you haven't, and you fought hard. Alexander Horazzi enlisted in the Army when he was only 17. Alex served throughout the war, but if you tried to call him a hero, he'd tell you he was just a regular grunt in the service. That's what he told us, a regular grunt. I don't think so. Thank you. I know it is. You're not a regular anything. You're a hero. You're a hero. All of you are heroes. In the weeks and months that took place after the surprise attack, and that was a vicious surprise attack, millions of American patriots like these men answered the same call and went to war. They fought, they bled, they sacrificed, and they triumphed. Many died to America against our enemies and to defeat the enemies of all humanity. The legacy of that legendary American generation is carved deep into the stone monuments of history, across the battlefields, oceans, and harrowing skies of Europe and the Pacific throughout the war. One great battle cry could be heard by American friends and foes alike. Remember Pearl Harbor. Have you heard that before a couple of times? Remember Pearl Harbor.
Remember Pearl Harbor as we go to meet the foe. Just remember Pearl Harbor as we did the Alamo. We shall always remember how they died for liberty. Just remember Pearl Harbor and go on to victory.
Yeah. He's a very shy person, too. And a great football player. Today, our entire nation pauses to remember Pearl Harbor and the brave warriors who on that day stood tall and fought for America. As I signed the proclamation making this National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day, I ask that God continue to bless and watch over each of you as very, very special people to our country. And God is watching over you, and we appreciate it. Thank you. Our surviving World War II veterans are a precious national treasure. So I'm going to sign this proclamation, and we're going to, I see there's one pen, but we're going to get plenty of other pens and other things for you guys so you remember this day. And again, we'll do it for another 7 years. Okay, 7 years. And you all have to promise you're going to be around, right? We're going to be around. We're going to be around. We're going to be together. Okay? Thank you. Thank you very much. Let's sign the proclamation. Thank you. Fantastic. That was so great, it was like, you really made this very exciting. Some free entertainment, right? Okay, this is National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day 2017. And we've got pins for everybody. Great man. What do you think? How's the penmanship? Okay? Right? It's okay? Thank you, everybody. See you next year, okay? Oh, I thought he gave it to him. I thought he gave it to him. That's okay. I'll see you next year. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. See you all next year.
I'm not sure what we count.
That's right.
Yes, sir, that's right. I've got a hat for you to sign for me.
I'll do that.
You gave me a hat, but you never signed it. I brought it with me.
I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to bring them into the Oval Office. We're going to take some pictures of the Oval Office. All right? You know the Oval Office, right? We're going to go to the Oval Office.
Okay.
Good idea, Mike?
Very good.
We're going to do that right now. Come on. Follow me. Thank you, everybody.
Mr. President, any comment on Senator Al Franken? He made some comments about you earlier today, sir.
I didn't hear it, sir.
Do you have a comment about sexual harassment in this country? What the message should be, sir?
That was President Trump in a very sweet ceremony there in the Roosevelt Room, which is just across the hall from the Oval Office, with veterans from Pearl Harbor on the 76th day of remembrance. He asked all of them to be around for the next 7 years. He said he will do this event for the rest of it. He's assuming he's going to get reelected, and I think that he probably is on target there at this point. And also, he had one of the vets do an impromptu song about remembering Pearl Harbor, a great event for those vets, and now they've gone into the Oval Office for a private meeting with the president and a chance to take pictures with him. So very great to see those veterans all having a chance to be at the White House. All right, a new poll targeting young voters, spelling bad news for mainstream politics. According to the latest survey by the Harvard Institute of Politics, just 21% of young Americans say the Republican Party cares about people like them. What's really surprising is that only 34% feel Democrats have their back. But look at this. The same poll finding 74% are not politically engaged or politically active. Joining us now is Citizens United Chairman David Bossie and former Trump campaign manager Corey Lewandowski, co-authors of a brand new book, Let Trump Be Trump, the inside story of his rise to the presidency. I'm so glad you're on the show. I was hoping that you were going to be here because I would like to shake your hands. One thing I want to ask you about the book before I get to that poll, you sort of out game changed. So you started writing this contemporaneously while the campaign was going on. Did you always think that you would publish it?
No, not at all. And I'll just say that Let Trump Be Trump, the title of our book, is exactly what you just saw the president do in the Roosevelt Room. He connects with people. He's very warm and endearing, and bringing those gentlemen in. By the way, hearing that song, I just hadn't heard that song in a long time, and it was definitely
so
a warm moment. Yeah.
Corey, how about you? Was this book something that you thought you would do initially?
No, I never thought I'd run a presidential campaign, let alone write a book about the presidential campaign. But, what's really important, and Dave and I wanted to memorialize this, is how successful Donald Trump was with all the obstacles that were thrown at him in the campaign, from the mainstream media to the Democratic opponent in the general election, to the 16 primary opponents in the primary, and everything that he overcame. We really write the behind-the-scenes story of what it was like to be on that great roller coaster ride.
So I wanted to ask you something, Corey. I think I'll start with you because, I worked in a White House. I never worked on the campaign, although I was around during it. And I'm the kind of person that if the president ever yelled at me, I think I would melt and I would be like in a puddle on the floor and unable to actually work. You write this, though. You say, I think it was on the flight from La Crosse, Wisconsin to Superior, Wisconsin that Monday morning when I went to the back of the plane and put my head down. It's a 20, 30-minute flight. I fell asleep. And the boss looked back at me and said, Corey, if you can't take it, we'll get somebody else. I just don't feel well, Mr. Trump, you said. Now, that's obviously very mild. You write about another part where the president yelled at Paul Manafort. And I was curious if you could take me behind the scenes. When the president gets mad like that, is it a momentary blowing off of steam and everybody moves on, or do you feel it for a while?
No, look, it's an absolute one moment in time. And the reason that the president, was angry with me was if I didn't deliver, if I wasn't my very best, every day in the campaign, he would come down and give it 125%, and he demanded of the staff. But I can tell you this, as many times I had my face ripped off, and I was okay with it, the next day, an hour later, he'd say, hey, Corey, you're doing a great job. Let me call your family. Let me tell them how thankful I am that you're part of this team. And he did it so many times that gracious nature we also tried to talk about in the book.
Well, and that certainly provides a bond between a staffer and a principal or the president. David, could I ask you about that what I started with? And I'm curious just because you were at the forefront of a new political movement. Are you concerned at all about the youth of this country, which is that's the largest generation now, feeling like neither party cares about them, they're not politically engaged, or do you think that they'll eventually become politically engaged as they get older?
Throughout history, I think Ronald Reagan was the last time that I can remember that the youth of this country stood up in 1980 and 1984 and really got engaged in politics. And it's been a while since then. You saw it a little bit with Barack Obama's first election.
Right.
And now I think we're seeing the youth really take a back seat, politics take a back seat, and I hope that they get engaged. But you see it as people get older. As they get older, they get jobs, have families, buy homes. They get more serious about life. That's when people get involved with what's going on in the country.
All right. Well, I congratulate you both on the book. I'm sure it will be a bestseller for weeks to come. David Bossie and Corey Lewandowski, thanks so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
All right, lawmakers on Capitol Hill trying to find common ground on a final version of the Republican tax bill. I'm going to talk to the co-chairs of the House Bipartisan Problem Solvers Caucus. That's next. Plus, in light of Senator Al Franken resigning, is there a growing Republican divide over Alabama Senate candidate Roy Moore? We're going to ask Senator Ted Cruz coming up next.
My position hasn't changed. I have not changed. I think he should have dropped out. I think he should. Just because the polling has changed doesn't change my opinion on the matter. So I stand by what I said before.
Fox News Alert, Senator Ted Cruz among the Republican lawmakers meeting with President Trump at the White House just moments ago, trying to advance the GOP agenda. The Texas Republican and former presidential candidate, he joins me now. You made it back up to the Capitol. What was the meeting like? Are you guys close? Do you think this is going to happen?
I think it was a very positive and productive meeting. I brought a number of senators with me, and we were talking about the problem that is occurring, the potentially tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of blue-collar union jobs that are at risk in refineries across the country, in Texas, in Pennsylvania, all across the country. And they're at risk because of a regulatory system that is broken down. And right now, these refineries are spending hundreds of millions of dollars to buy these artificial credits that speculators have driven up to stratospheric costs. It doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And this conversation was all about finding a win-win solution that saves the jobs of the blue-collar working-class refinery workers, and at the same time that helps corn farmers sell even more corn. And I think there is a win-win solution, and we had a very productive conversation moving towards that solution.
Was there any conversation about the potential government shutdown?
We did not get into that. We were focused on saving the jobs of these refinery workers, and the group as a whole agreed with the president to reconvene next week and to expand the group and work together to find a win-win that is a win for blue-collar workers, a win for jobs, but also a win for farmers at the same time.
Earlier today, one of your Senate colleagues, Al Franken, he decided that he was going to resign. He said in the coming weeks. I don't know exactly what that meant. But let me ask you something for your reaction. The Wall Street Journal editorial page today wrote, Mr. Trump should withdraw his endorsement of Judge Moore and take the RNC with him. Embarrassing? Yes, perhaps. The alternative, where Mr. Trump stands now, is worse. If Mr. Moore wins, he will haunt the Trump presidency. The Democrats took their sexual harassers off the table. Mr. Trump may put his parties in the Senate. Do you have any reaction to that? Do you think that this is a problem for the Republicans?
Well, I think the allegations against Al Franken were serious. They came from multiple women, and I think he did today what he had to do. I wish him well in his next chapter of life.
I think we similarly saw very serious allegations against Democratic Congressman John Conyers, and he likewise announced he is resigning because those allegations appear to be backed up and credible and true. And I think that was the right thing to do as well. Concerning Roy Moore, the allegations that have been leveled against him are serious. If they are true, I said at the time, if these allegations are true, Roy Moore should have dropped out and allowed the people of Alabama to vote for a strong conservative. But if they're not true, then Roy Moore needs to continue to vigorously defend himself and demonstrate they're not true. And I think it comes down to whether these charges are true or false. I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. Well, I don't know if we're going to get it, but the voters will decide on Tuesday. Senator Ted Cruz, thanks so much.
Thank you, Dana.
So one thing not included in the tax reform bill, an overhaul to entitlement programs. Speaker of the House Paul Ryan saying yesterday that's next on the agenda.
We're going to have to get back next year at entitlement reform, which is how you tackle the debt and the deficit. But you have two things you've got to do. Reform entitlement programs, grow the economy. Tax reform grows the economy.
Let's bring in the co-chairs of the House Bipartisan Problem Solvers Caucus, Democrat Josh Gottheimer of New Jersey and Republican Tom Reed of New York. Gentlemen, let me ask you about the tax reform in particular, because that's most immediately on the table. Do you see there any possibility in the conference of getting to a place where you think that is a better bill for the people of your states and your constituents? Josh, I'll start with you.
Hey, Dana. Thanks for having us. I'm working incredibly hard and working across the aisle with Leonard, Lance, and others, because I believe if we can actually bring back the SALT deduction to make sure that people in my state don't have their taxes go up because of this bill and that property values don't go down because of this bill, that's the ultimate goal. So I'm going to keep fighting to the end. That's what I've been working on, and I see a solution.
What about you, Representative Reed? Do you think that there's a possibility that this could get solved? Because there's a lot... Yesterday, Chairman Brady said everything is still on the table.
Yeah, no, I do believe the complete elimination of the state and local tax deduction obviously is not the right policy, and we fought that, and we got the compromise position on the property tax portion of it. Now, where I think there's an opportunity to go even further is maybe expand that compromise position to the income tax side of the equation so that people can deduct that as part of their property tax deduction. But we're probably not going to be, realistically speaking, be able to bring back the entire state and local tax deduction as the status quo on the books allows for.
And Dana, we put forth a plan to actually bring it back, not actually reduce the deficit, and keep the corporate rates where they are at 20% and not increase taxes for anybody, because I believe we need to deliver a tax cut. We can't have it that we're sending literally billions of dollars in jobs out of my state and out of Tom's state to these moocher states, these other states in the country that take way too much of our money to begin with, and I just don't understand why we'd be propping them up.
Let me ask you, too, this is the first time I've had you on together, and I admire the bipartisan work that you were trying to accomplish. The Wall Street Journal had a poll about bipartisanship, and it asked if your vote for Congress came down to someone who would compromise or just stick to their position regardless of whether or he or she could gain consensus. 51% say they would choose a candidate who will make compromise. 38% they would take the person who would stick to their positions. Let me start with you, Representative Gottheimer. I know you from before, so I won't call you Josh. There is something to be said about reaching across the aisle to work with the other party. But do the people of your party, the Democrats, actually respect what you're trying to do, or would they prefer you to move left like the rest of the party has?
I think some days the left loves you, some days the right loves you, but at the end of the day, Dana, I really believe you do what's best for at home and the people you represent. I don't worry about the National Democratic Party. That's not my constituency. My constituency is the people of New Jersey's 5th District. And I think actually people, they come up to you and say, on the issues where you can get to yes, as Tom always says, then you should try. And I think that's what we actually try to do all the time. We're not always going to agree on everything, as you can see, but there's plenty we do agree on.
Congressman Reed, do you think that the Republicans will be able to keep the Democrats from shutting down the government when that comes to a head in a couple weeks?
I do believe we're going to be able to work across the aisle. We're going to be able to solve the issue of funding the government and keeping the lights on, because that's the right thing to do. And back to the poll and back to the question you raised earlier, what we're really, I think people are looking for are people who want to govern and who will lead by governing and having the hard conversations and getting to yes. That is not about giving up your principles. That is not about giving up your ideology. Correct. It is about sincerely talking with other people, may have a different point of view, and when you do that and you develop trust, You can govern to take care of the American people's problems. That's what Josh is about. That's what I'm about. And the entire Problem Solvers Caucus, that's the heart of it that we're trying to do for the American people.
I keep getting caught calling Josh by his first name, and that's not appropriate. Congressman Gottheimer,
No, it's always Tom with me.
Congressman Reed, thank you so much for being here today.
I got 11 older brothers and sisters. You call me Tom all the time.
Josh is fine, Dana. Thank you very much.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
New international reaction to the president's decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Setting in motion our embassy's move there is another country ready to follow our lead.
Shepard Smith on the Fox News deck. Coming up top of the hour, President Trump set to meet with Republican and Democratic leaders in the Oval Office. The deadline is tomorrow for Congress to come up with a spending deal to avoid a government shutdown. Democratic leaders Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer pulled out of the last meeting after the president attacked them on Twitter. Can they come together this time around? We'll see. Top of the hour, Shepard Smith reporting. We'll see you then.
Last night, United Nations Ambassador Nikki Haley told Fox News security concerns might force American athletes to stay home from the 2018 Winter Olympics in South Korea. Listen.
What have we always said? We don't ever fear anything. We live our lives. We use our freedom. We have that. And certainly that's a perfect opportunity for all of them to go and do something they've worked so hard for. What we will do is make sure that we're taking every precaution possible to make sure that they're safe and to know everything that's going on around them.
So that was last night, but moments ago, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders tweeted, "The U.S. looks forward to participating in the Winter Olympics in South Korea. The protection of Americans is our top priority, and we are engaged with the South Koreans and other partner nations to secure the venues." International reaction critical of President Trump's historic announcement about Jerusalem and our embassy. Egypt's president says the move undermines chances for peace. The UK government calls it unhelpful. And the terror group Hamas says it's a declaration of war on us. Joining me now, Ambassador Ron Dermer, Israel's ambassador to the United States. Sir, thank you for being here.
Good to be with you.
All of that commentary, to me, was expected. Is there any international reaction that you maybe have heard privately that is supportive of the move, but that these capitals can't yet actually say that because of domestic politics?
I think that's true. I mean, I wouldn't reveal that, but I think that's true in the region and outside the region. And look, the people of Israel, the government of Israel, is just very grateful to President Trump for taking a step that 12 previous presidents, not just the ones since the Oslo peace process began, but 12 previous presidents since President Truman did not take. And we think it was long overdue, and it's great that he had the courage to do it, even though he stood alone. And he stood alone with Israel in recognizing our capital, which has been, you know, the eternal capital of the Jewish people for about 3,000 years, since the days of King David, and the capital of our state for 70 years, since 1949, so 68 years. And we're very pleased with that decision. We don't think it undermines peace in any way. We think actually it makes the people in the region see the president as somebody who keeps his commitments, and that's the most important currency in the Middle East. If leaders can understand that a president of the United States is willing to keep his commitments, even in the face of international pressure.
And one of the things that some of these Arab nations have said is that this will cause a day of rage, that there will be more attacks, that there will be stepped-up violence. Have you seen any indication of that, and are you concerned about it?
Well, it's not really news that Hamas is announcing days of rage. They have 365 days of rage a year at the existence of Israel. They have a charter that calls for the murder of Jews worldwide, so that's really not news. I think it's important to understand, Dana, that these are just not days of rage that erupt and come from bottom up. This is coming top down. The Palestinian Authority announces this, that they are going to protest. They cancel the schools, and so they get kids in the street to actually throw rocks, to stir up violence, Molotov cocktails, and in something like that, somebody can get hurt, and that could actually escalate the situation on the ground. So it's important for people to follow leaders, to follow President Trump's lead, and to call for calm. Hopefully we'll de-escalate. We have people going to mosques tomorrow, and then after they get out of the mosque, the Palestinian Authority may ask them to participate in protests once again. Hamas will surely do that, but we'll do everything we can, our security services, in order to calm the situation, and hopefully when the dust clears, we can get back to the business of trying to advance meaningful peace between Israelis and Palestinians and all our neighbors.
So one last question I have for you. When you are talking to other ambassadors, I'm curious if they in some ways think that it is good to, if you have Saudi with all the changes there, being more friendly and open to Israel to try to combat Iran. Is that a reasonable thing for me to be thinking about as I look at all this and try to read the tea leaves?
Well, I think there is what I will say this, that there is a recognition of governments in the region that Israel is not their enemy, that actually Israel is an ally in confronting their real enemies, which are first and foremost Iran, that's been empowered because of the nuclear deal, because of the sanctions relief, and they're racing through the whole region in Iraq, in Syria, in Lebanon, in Yemen, which actually confronts the Saudis because they're trying to establish in Yemen what they established against Israel in Lebanon. They're trying to create a Lebanon in Yemen that they can use to actually attack the Saudis through their proxy, the Houthis. So the governments in the region are concerned about the empowerment of Iran, and they're also concerned about Sunni fanatic groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS and others. And so there is a potential here for a new alliance. And I think that President Trump and his team, Jared Kushner, Jason Greenblatt, and others, actually see this potential. And I hope that they will be able to launch a peace initiative that will take advantage of these changes that are happening in the region.
All right, Ambassador, thank you so much for making it work for us today on this show, because that's a perspective I think is important for people to see the bigger picture. Ambassador Ron Dermer, thank you so much.
Thank you.
The FBI director on the hot seat, answering questions about whether or not the FBI is in, quote, tatters, and whether they make mistakes. What he told lawmakers, coming up next.